We live?
It says so on my screen.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Yay! Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another Midnight Sun Monday, but on Thursday. So thank you everybody for your patience, for coming and joining us, kicking off your holiday weekend with us as we talk about Twilight book versus movie. I'm Amy Taylor. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and even Tumblr as Oh My Carlisle. I worked on Page to Premiere and His Golden Eyes back in the Twilight days. And welcome here tonight. I'm going to do the introductions while Lori's making sure that we're all set up from a tech standpoint. So with that, I will kick it over to Cara to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. This is Cara from Twilight Moms. You also know me as Moonlighting KO on Twitter and Illuminate on the old Twilight Moms website. I am thrilled to be here and once again discuss what's finally going to happen in the new book and the book versus movies. One warning for all y'all, I have to unfortunately jump a little early tonight. So if you see me sneak out, it's not to go yell at my kids. It's because I have another Zoom to get to. It's a really big Zoomy day.
Thanks, Cara. I'm going to welcome back Cassie.
Actually, that's my sister.
Yes.
Okay, because it's been happening all day. It's totally
Oh my
fine.
gosh. Lori started it.
Yes.
Callie, I'm so sorry. We haven't seen Cassie yet, but
It's okay. Yeah, no, I'm Callie and my sister is Cassie, and we actually did a podcast called Twilight Series Theories back in the day and had a website, twilightseriestheories.com. And now I'm on Instagram as @Callie Creates and also @Callie Ross. You can find me in both those places. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and really excited to talk about this book versus movie stuff. This is my jam.
and she's also an author. Savannah, welcome back.
Hi. Well, I'm Savvy. I'm on Instagram and any other place as Troy's My Angel, one of the random non-Twilight related tags, I think, throughout all of this. And I was just a really big fan, and I just know everybody from the stuff that I did through Twilight. So I'm just lucky to be here.
We're happy to have you.
We're thrilled to have you.
Yay! And we have a new guest tonight, my partner in crime, Mel. We host Twilight Tuesdays on Instagram Live every Tuesday, where we're rereading the books right now. We're in the middle of Eclipse. So let me hand it over to Melissa to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Melissa. I worked primarily with Facebook groups way back in the heyday of Twilight, helped run Twilight Addicts only on Facebook, and that was a menial task. And now I actually co-run the Ladies of Isle Esme. We try to keep news and events, especially with me living in Washington, up to date, what's going on out here. And we're actually looking to potentially plan some stuff for later on this summer. So.
Woo-hoo. Well, I'm so happy you're here. I get you 2 nights in a row.
True.
We also have our Twilight Tuesdays this week. It was a weird week. So Twilight Wednesdays, Midnight Sun Thursdays. Well, with that, welcome Mel. I'm going to hand it over to Lori.
I'm Lori. I'm from the Lexicon. I'm checking the I'm gonna every now and then if I'm looking over my shoulders because I'm reading the comments on YouTube. I don't know if anybody else does anybody else have YouTube on, because usually Natasha has YouTube on.
I can. Give me a second.
Yep, I have it running on my phone.
We'll just, if you see some questions as they pop up, because this was voted on. We're discussing this because this is what people wanted to talk about. They said, we want to talk about books versus films. The other thing that I keep getting requests is we want to talk about the quotes from Midnight Sun that Stephanie's releasing. And yes, we'll do that. But let's get a good amount of quotes. Because like when there was only 4 quotes, that's not a very good. Okay, that's it. That's our quotes. Thanks. Bye. So we're gonna get some good quotes and a good number of quotes, and then we will talk about the quotes before Midnight Sun comes out. So tonight we're doing books versus films. All right. So I think I know the answer to this one. For each of you, did the books? Did you come into the fandom on just the books and then the movies came out, or did you come into the fandom because of the movies and then read the books? That kind of thing. And so about what time did you come in? Because I think books to film affects us differently if we started with film and then read books, or if you read the book and then the film. So where did you come in? Kara, where'd you come in?
I came in on the books between New Moon and Eclipse release. So that was my first entry into the great Twilight experience.
Okay.
Was waiting on Eclipse.
Callie. How about you?
Okay, so for me, it was right after New Moon was released, the book. So I came in kind of like Kara, just maybe a little bit before, but I read Twilight and New Moon had just been released and picked that up too. So I had both of them in my hands, and then I was so mad because I had to wait for the rest. Luckily, I did have a sister-in-law to talk and a sister to talk about it with, so it was all good.
How about, let's see, who's next on the list? Amy.
I was late. So I actually started reading Twilight after the movie, like when they were starting to promote the movie coming out in DVD release. I read Twilight and New Moon before I watched the film for the first time. So I kind of had some ideas in my head of what I wanted and what I expected of the characters.
So the movie was out, but
yeah,
you went and specifically picked up the book and read it before you went to the movie.
Or before I saw the movie. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the movie the first time until it was like on my TV in my bedroom. So, or like it was the DVD at that point. So I didn't see it in the original run in the theaters. So yeah, like spring 2009 is when I like pretty much started in March through May that I read the books.
Savvy.
I'm actually later than you, Amy. I started reading the books in summer of 2009. Twilight had already come out. It was already on DVD. And I saw like the first clips of New Moon at the MTV Movie Awards. And I was like, what is that? And then it was like, oh, that's the Twilight stuff. So I was like, I have to read that. So I'm all for reading the books before movies.
There is something to be said. That New Moon trailer, that is one of the best trailers, like in the history of trailers. That New Moon trailer was just so good.
Yes, I agree.
All right, Mel.
I actually started reading the books at a very strange time in 2008, and came to find out after reading both Twilight and New Moon that they were actually filming Twilight at the same time that I was reading the book. So I was still at the end where I still did have to wait for Breaking Dawn as a book to come out. And I was very, very impatient. My roommates got very impatient with me for waiting.
I think everybody was impatient. Well, I read Twilight in January of 2006, like just a couple months after it was released. And my experience is very different than everybody's, because then she sent me the arc of New Moon, and then she asked me to read Eclipse before it was published. And then I said, well, what's wrong with it? And then she told me the story of Breaking Dawn. So I knew the whole story right before like all the books, and then I couldn't write fan fiction. It kind of ruined it for me, but so it was really hard to participate, but I read the books before I saw the movies. And then all of the casting news came out and we were all like, what? Who? So what is your favorite book and why? And like, what's your favorite moment from that book? So let's just start with that before we get into book versus film, because again, I think your attitude towards a film is skewed by if it's your favorite. Like, I'll just say my favorite Harry Potter book is my least favorite Harry Potter movie.
Really?
Because I think they did not do the book very well. That's Prisoner of Azkaban.
I was gonna say it's Prisoner of Azkaban.
Because Prisoner of Azkaban, that whole movie, it's like, anyway, don't get me started on that. So what is your favorite book and why? And do you have like, what's your favorite moment in the book? We'll start with Callie.
Okay, so I might be like way off for everybody, but so my favorite book is Breaking Dawn. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's not because of the beginning of the book. It's because of the end of the book and everything that happens with Alice. I think she's just always been one of my favorite characters, and just all the work, the behind the scenes stuff that as a reader you can kind of comprehend. I feel like in the movies, we'll get there in a minute, you can't. But yeah, Breaking Dawn, and it's probably because everything started to make sense, at least with Alice. And it might also be my least favorite book. I don't know, because of other stuff. It's one of those funny things. But yeah, I think I remember sitting in a hotel room that a group of a book club that I was in, we decided to get a hotel room and all stay up all night long and read the book when it came out. And it was so fun because we were all pretty fast readers, and everybody was just like, no. And then we'd look at each other. It's like, wait, I gotta get there. They'd be like, yes. So yeah, it was a fun experience, as well as just everything that culminated in that book. I just love it.
That
Okay,
sounds like the best thing ever.
How about Amy?
Eclipse is my favorite, and Mel and I are actually in the middle of doing a reread of that right now. So I'm kind of, remembering things as we go along. What I really love about Eclipse is that you really start getting inside the Cullen house. You really start seeing the interactions between those characters, because like Twilight, it's still also new. Like Bella's just meeting them. New Moon, they're not really there, but like you have these moments where the family's together and you see these interactions. And the other part being the histories, Rosalie's flashback, Jasper's flashback, the whole story of the tribe. Like those are things that we've been diving into and taking forever to talk about, because there's so much more that like we kind of forgot about because we've seen the film so much. That is so, gives you so much more insight into all of that part of the world that just makes it fantastic.
Yep. Eclipse is my favorite too, but we'll get to that one. Mel.
So I'm on the same page as Amy. Mine is Eclipse. A huge part of that reason was because when I initially read the first book, and there's just those little like quips of "we hate Rosalie" type thing, and I found so many other fans that were just like, "Rosalie's awful. I hate her so much." We finally got Eclipse, and her entire story is explained, and you're just like, yes, I knew it wasn't because she's just this angry, horrible person. It's because there's something there. So that's a huge reason as to why Eclipse is my favorite. But then we also get, again, like what Amy said, we get those family interactions, we get other histories, we get things that we didn't get to explore through Twilight and New Moon.
How about Savvy?
My favorite is New Moon. A lot of people are like, oh my God, it's so depressing and everything. But I mean, I read the first, I read the first book and loved it, just like how everybody else got hooked on this stuff. But this stuff kind of came into my life when I was going through a really hard time. I had lost my high school boyfriend to leukemia. 6 months later, my uncle was killed unexpectedly, and my whole family was falling apart, and I was off at college for the first time, and it was just, I was a hot mess. And so I had a lot going on, and when I sat down and started reading New Moon, it was just something that resonated with me, where Bella was going through this horrible thing, and some of the things that she was feeling was just it kind of gave words to what I was going through. And it was very cathartic, lots of tears. I'm like, oh my God. But even to this day, like when I read it, I don't get sad anymore. It makes me like, it actually reminds me about like how much I've come through too. And I just got that connection where like, I love the character of Bella because I feel like I've gone through something that's been like upheaving like that, like she has as well. So that was just something that really solidified how much I liked this fandom, and it was something that I finally like got back into. I hadn't been as excited about something like Twilight like that in many years.
That makes a really good point, because New Moon takes a big hit for when Edward leaves, that she becomes like comatose, and so many people are like, that's so unrealistic. I am telling you, I work in a high school. I have watched so many girls break up with boys, and that is entirely realistic. entirely. I have had to talk girls out of the worst depressions over boys. Yeah, it's entirely realistic. I'm sorry. Kara, it's your turn.
Okay. My favorite book is also Eclipse, because for two different reasons. One, because we get a lot of the Cullen family backstory. And I loved just reading the history and thinking, like, as I was reading Twilight and New Moon, I was like, there's got to be more to these people. And you start to unpack so much in Eclipse, and you get the background on each characters and how they got where they are. And so it helped fill in so much for me. And I was thrilled. Also, possibly because I waited so long between New Moon and Eclipse actually coming out. And the other thing is because I think Bella really, you know, she grows up. It's graduation. She knows what she wants. She's focused on where she's going. And she's really, whereas New Moon, she's torn apart and she's a little bounced around. She really takes control of her life in Eclipse. Eclipse is going the way she wants it to. No matter what werewolf, no matter what Volturi, no matter who gets in her way, she's gonna just make it happen. And I love that. And, you know, senior year of high school was my absolute favorite too. So it always just has a warm place in my heart.
So my favorite's Eclipse. I have a different relationship with Eclipse because I've read Eclipse so many times. I was telling Amy this the other day, that sometimes I say that's in the book and people are like, no, it's not. And I'm like, which version of Eclipse was that in? Because I read the first version of Eclipse and then she like edited it and edited it and edited it. And so sometimes I forget what's in the actual printed book. But there are two things in Eclipse that, like, everything, I agree with everything that you said, but there are two moments in Eclipse that just like seal the deal for me. And one is the tent scene, the fire and ice conversation. Love that scene. And can we say leg hitch?
There's like entire Facebook groups donated just to leg hitch.
The leg hitch.
But actually, there's a conversation in that whole scene. There's a part where he tells her, he says, you know, that you're not that girl, but I'm that guy. And I would have, if I would have met you in the back when I was young, when I was human, this is how I would have courted you. And it's so Anne of Green Gables. And that comes off of a conversation that I had with Stephanie about how I felt Gilbert Blythe was the most perfect man. And that people were saying, well, Edward's the most perfect. And I'm like, no, Gilbert Blythe is the most perfect man in literature, in my opinion. And I don't know, when she added that in, I was like, I feel like I'm reading something from Gilbert Blythe. And she goes, I was thinking of that. So I don't know. That's just little bit of insight right there. Okay, so now flip side. What is your favorite movie and why? We'll start with Amy.
It's challenging at times because different ones have, at this point, have different feelings and emotions, and extended editions and non-extended editions and deleted scenes. But I still kind of always fall back to Eclipse. And, you know, for some of the similar reasons, you get to start seeing that family dynamic. The fact that, like, Mel and I were talking about this as we were doing our reread, that like the scene in the beginning where all the Cullens are chasing Victoria and the wolves are chasing it. It's like that insight into something that we didn't like in New Moon and Twilight. You never see anything really that's not Bella and Edward, or that's not Bella's perspective. So to start to get sort of that insight into other things that are happening, what's happening with the newborns, what's happening with the Cullens, like what's happening with the wolf pack, to see those other views when she's not there. I really thought they did really well. And since I love the book, I was happy with the movie. And we got the flashbacks in there for Rosalie and Jasper, which we really didn't get much of Carlisle's in Twilight. So.
All right, Savvy, your turn.
My favorite movie is also, that mirrors my favorite book, New Moon. The way that I was kind of pulled into the fandom was just that scene of Jacob doing that phase on the fly, and I thought it was the coolest thing I had seen. And I really like, again, just how the world kind of expands a little bit. You get the other side and get to learn more about like the Quileutes. And again, I kind of had a personal tie to that too. I was studying Native American anthropology at the time, and I was focusing on the Pacific Northwest. So like I knew who the Quileutes were, and I knew kind of what the layout is of that area. So it was kind of cool to sit there and be like, oh, okay, so that's kind of true to that area too. So I really liked that. And then I mean, I love the Volturi. I absolutely love just the arc of this big ancient family that just does anything that they can to remain in power, and just collecting all these really powerful creatures around them and just making themselves, even just all the pomp and circumstance of it. I just absolutely love it.
Okay, Callie.
Okay, here we go. I am going to also say New Moon, and it is because of two things. The first is the scene when Bella goes through the months of her issue, like her depression and her sadness, and I just thought that was so well done. Like, just it obviously when you're reading the book, like Savvy was talking about, you're like but it just was so beautiful the way you could feel it, but it got to the next scene, like you got through it, and obviously she didn't get over it, but you know what I'm talking about. It just was a beautiful scene. And then secondly, I remember I was just looking it up just to make sure. Chris Weitz, I actually got to talk to him one time, and we talked about the coloration, or like, I don't know what the director's like wording for all of this is in Hollywood, but how there was actually like a golden hue that he used throughout that film. And then later when you talk to some of the other directors, they did the same thing with different families, or different whether it was werewolves or vampires, or Denali versus Volturi, whatever. They used all of these neat things in the film that it just was a warmth in New Moon that I loved, I guess, because of that. Oh, I'm knocking stuff over. But yeah, New Moon is definitely definitely my favorite movie.
Okay, Mel.
So I kind of flip back and forth a lot with this, and it goes between Twilight and Breaking Dawn Part 2. Breaking Dawn Part 2 is more because we get all of these other nomads, all of these other covens that were just like, what? And I also kind of have like little personal ties to certain people that got to be the actors that portrayed them. So that brings a lot of that in for me. But then Twilight, because it was, again, I didn't realize when I was reading the book it was being filmed. I go back to that and I'm just like, that's my origin. That's why I fell in love with this whole thing in the first place. And even though it was, a lot of people are just like, oh, that was awful, it's so horrible. It was just supposed to be an indie film. Like, it wasn't supposed to be as big as it became.
All right, Kara.
Kara, Callie, Cassie, whatever.
I swear I know you people.
She swears she does. I'm torn, really. My favorite movie overall was Breaking Dawn Part 1, just because I loved all the other covens going in, and I love the way Bill Condon gave us different POVs, and just the cinematography throughout that entire movie took it to a whole nother level, in my opinion. And I love the way it looked, and I love the way it all tied together. Of course, then there's the scene in Breaking Dawn Part 2, which I guess isn't a surprise to anyone anymore, but when we all saw it premiere night, everyone screamed bloody murder. But to touch on what Callie was saying before, Melissa Rosenberg writing the scene in the top of New Moon with Bella just curled up in her rocking chair and the months flying by, it still kind of makes me want to cry to this day, because I didn't know how they were going to do that, because it was months and months and pages in the book. And I thought, oh my God, who's going to sit there for 15 minutes and suffer through this? This is not going to play on film. And it was so beautiful the way she just intertwined everything, that you felt her pain, but then we moved on. And, she got out of it, and you weren't horribly depressed throughout the entire film. All I thought was, we're going to have 20 minutes of just staring at her in a chair, and it's going to be the most awful thing in the world. And it was so beautiful and so touching, and thank God did not take up half the movie.
Kara, your answer almost is identical to mine. You think the months part, it's a toss-up between the months and the battle in Breaking Dawn Part 2 of the most surprising, how is is somebody going to adapt this? Those are the two most like surprising things to me. The Months was just a beautiful. However, the movie that like totally moved me the most was Breaking Dawn Part 1. And again, it's because I felt for the first time somebody had actually treated it like, I'm making a true movie. I'm not just trying to satisfy a couple of silly little Mormon fans somewhere. I'm trying to make a cinematic experience for people. And Breaking Dawn Part 2 carried on to that, but plus the journey that Bella goes and how well they hit all of the key points of the female experience. I thought Breaking Dawn Part 1 was just such a good movie. Anyway, so some of us our favorite book was the same movie. Some of us not. All right, so now what we're going to do is, we're going to take turns talking about the differences in each movie. But if, I have a feeling that we'll all just kind of pile on, and here's something else I thought, and we'll start like piling on each other. But I have a list of like, we'll go around robin kind of a thing, but please feel free to jump in if you need to. All right, so we're going to start with Twilight. Let's talk about, just try to focus on one major difference between Twilight the film and Twilight the book, and it can be something that you thought was positive, and it can be something that you thought was negative. So we'll just start going around. We'll start with Mel.
The biggest thing that stood out to me was them not including the blood typing scene, and I felt like that was so important reading the book, and I was like, where was this? Where'd it go? What happened?
I have no explanation for why they changed it, why they cut that out.
I feel like that's comes up to the top of the list quite often as being like everybody's number one thing.
Yeah.
Okay, how about who's next on my list? Savvy.
Well, that was kind of my thing for Twilight, was because that was one of my favorite scenes in the book. I just thought it was so cute because when you think about vampires and all that blood stuff, it seemed kind of hokey in theory, like, oh, you have a vampire sitting in a classroom full of kids pricking their fingers to do the blood sampling, the blood typing test. But it turned out really great, but that's book wise. So I was kind of disappointed that wasn't in the movie. But the thing that I liked kind of more, or the thing that I liked about the movie was a little bit more of the description and how Bella and Edward kind of got to know each other, and they had just those funky little scenes that were just them kind of walking together and talking. And I liked that. I liked how that kind of moved on and how that flowed a lot more than the pages upon pages of Bella sitting in her head and second guessing everything that he's saying. That got kind of tedious in the first book for me. So I liked how that kind of flowed, and it was very succinct, and it still got it across, and you still got to know that these characters are just getting to know each other. But it was just like, okay, it flowed very well right into like the next couple scenes.
Do we realize how much talking in a car Bella and Edward do in Twilight?
Yes.
Like they're sitting in a car talking for half the book. They're either in a meadow or they're in a car.
Yeah.
And that's just boring visually.
Yeah.
They have to change it up. Okay, Amy, I'm sorry if I took yours.
I think it would come as no surprise to anyone that my, sort of disappointing thing or change was that we really didn't get the whole Carlisle backstory on screen.
No.
I mean, that to me is what actually was the moment that I was pulled into the story, into the book. So I couldn't wait to see that on screen. And then it wasn't there. So that's, with Eclipse, I was so grateful that we did get all of Rosalie and Jasper, because it was so disappointing that Carlisle, one who founded this coven, we don't really see much other than him bite Edward and bite Esme.
And there is such potential, Carlisle could have had his own little TV show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Carlisle
I
MD,
still can.
Cullen MD, totally there.
Yes.
I mean, the the one other thing that like from Twilight was I would have liked to have seen Bella escaping from Jasper in the airport.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was another one that when I read, I was like, I can't wait to see this, like, as like a sort of thing where her running through and
Yeah.
she just walks out the door of the hotel.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, look, their backs are turned. I'm just going to go through the revolving door and there's a taxi waiting for me. Perfect.
A little bit convenient. All right, Kara.
The most annoying thing for me in Twilight was all of Bella's technology. The fact that, you know, she had her iPod, she had a newish computer, her room dressing, her set dressings for me were very fashionable and not very her initially. But the one scene that really captured it really well for me was the image of my head when Edward saves Bella when they go to Port Townsend to go shopping and he has to come skirting around in the car at the last second to keep her from getting attacked. That was almost frame for frame the way I had pictured it in my head. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is cool.
Callie.
Okay, so I'll keep it positive. I'll say Anna Kendrick. That is
Yes.
the comedic
It was.
to me was perfect. And I remember sitting next to her on a bus one time and thinking, she is so funny. And for real, like, look at her now. Like, that's, I mean, it just is one of those, they needed that. And I know that a lot of fans were upset about them combining characters and leaving certain characters out. But the comedic relief written, her acting, it was very, it just in some of those tense moments or in some of those down moments, she lifted up some of those scenes.
Similarly to that, I'm going to say Billy Burke.
Yes.
Through the whole saga, Charlie was like, I don't know about you guys, but Charlie was like almost a non-entity in the books. It was just there because she had to live with parents. And Charlie became a thing. Like, he completely became a totally different character for me. So much that I love Charlie now. But I'm going to throw out a couple of other things and somebody like raise your hand and say, oh, let me address this. A couple of things that I know trying to stay a little positive, but I'm going to go down some of the negative things. Wind chime Edward. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
That was awkward.
Like when he sparkles, you hear wind chimes.
Yeah. Like, what?
Not sure where that comes from. The fact that Edward can fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
jumping.
It's jumping.
Yeah, he's jumping, but they just kind of go, okay, here's the jump.
Much further. He's jumping, but doesn't pay attention to gravity because, you know, that happens. Vampire.
Very, very strong. This leg
Gravity. Gravity is different for
Yeah.
vampires. That's what it is. Gravity. They don't pay attention to that.
They have moon gravity. It's only
Yeah.
a third of the gravity.
That's
for
it. Mhm.
Right. The Cullen house bothered me.
Really? I like the Cullen house. It wasn't at all what I pictured.
It's an old plantation type.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah, there's nothing
Right.
like that in Forks.
No.
Not even close.
Well, there's not vampires in Forks either, Amy.
Ew, but something that modern.
I mean, there is one. We actually did an event there in 2014, I think it was. That's off of Rixon Road. That's just outside of Forks. And once I saw that house, I was like, yes, now I know where she was going. So yeah, I can see the difference between film house versus book house.
Yeah.
Although I loved the props in the film house, just the graduation caps.
Oh, yeah.
That was spot on. That was brilliant.
No, the house is awesome in the movie, but it's just not what's in the book at all.
At all.
No.
Oh, hi. If we're going to talk random things that totally didn't match up, pick a Volvo. Any Volvo.
Oh, okay. So that was back on my list. Shall we talk about Edward's car? It
And
progressed
how can they all fit in there?
less and less and less like the car in the book.
Oh God, no, the first Volvo, I refer to it as the mom jeans car.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the back of it, it's like big and then small. It looks like somebody in the 80s wearing mom jeans. I'm like, what is this car?
It is, yeah.
This
It's
is
the
so
high waist
not
jeans.
cool.
And there's no way all the Cullens could fit in that car. Emmett alone, Kellen could not have fit in that car, period. Never mind all of them stuffed in there every morning.
Yeah, no.
So I worked in the auto industry and I know the PR people from Volvo. So I've heard a lot of the stories of what went on behind the scene, which I can't necessarily share. But if you guys ever want to talk about it offline.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember when Volvo came out with the car and like were advertising it as the Twilight car. And the first time we saw the picture, we were like, that's not a real car.
Not even slightly.
It got worse and worse and worse. When he was
Worse.
driving like a black SUV, I'm like, whatever.
It was the soccer mom's car. Like every soccer mom has that.
I do. I'm like, I get it was the tie-in to that year's model or whatever, but still, they could have gone through the entire Volvo line and picked up, okay, Volvo doesn't own a sexy car, but still they have, they have sleek lined Volvos as opposed to the foxy but good Volvos.
Okay, Luisa Ardia, I apologize if I said your name wrong. She named something else that I had on my list: Spider Monkey and Monkey Man. What
I hate so much.
What the crap?
I mean, I personally was okay with the Monkey Man part, but the Spider Monkey, I was like,
that was just cringeworthy. I don't know. I got nothing. Come on. Wait a second, Lori. You're supposed to have insight for something like that. That's one of those weirdo things the Lex should have background
Well,
on.
wasn't it that like Rob was given a couple choices and went with the Spider Monkey one?
he was given 4 different choices and then chose that.
I'm trying to jump in.
Blame
No,
Rob.
it's okay. I
like
love
it.
you guys. I love listening because it's funny because Catherine Hardwicke actually talked about it and she loved it. Like
I know.
she loved it. And I remember my sister and I being like, okay, like you can love it.
Whatever.
It's like, I think when you're working with a director that is known for so many amazing movies that you're kind of like, when she's excited about it, I guess it works. It's great. And so, yeah, definitely mixed reviews though from the fans on that one.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you just don't leave any decisions up to Robert Pattinson. It's just not going to end out well.
Oh, there's
especially like that.
That's videos for God. That would take us years.
Yes.
Y'all,
I love
he's
the man.
Slices of cheese. So many slices.
awkward. There's just awkwardness there in
Awkward.
general. Like it's in his DNA. And
I-
so I think it's just, it came out because it would have normally come out of his mouth in real life.
So here's the thing though. I'm going to be completely honest. All right. And probably the fandom is going to hate me for this. And this is like for later. Twilight as a whole, the Twilight film is like my least favorite of the films because it's the only film when we sat in the first screening that I sat there like this. And when it got over, I literally turned to Laura and I went, okay, that wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. And I was like, all right, there's some things that are not great, but there were some good things too. And okay, all right. And I feel like the films, like it got progressively better, but it was a very independent film. It was a very low budget film. Nobody was supporting that film. And it's when it blew up, then the other films got more attention. So yeah, that's my whole thing on Twilight is like, because I know for a fact MTV picked it up first, and MTV cut out all of the Cullens except for Carlisle and Alice and Edward. Those were the only Cullens that were left. And my favorite aspect of the MTV script was that, first of all, Bella went to BYU in Salt Lake City, which is not a thing. BYU is in Provo, Utah. It is not in Salt Lake City. She lived in Salt Lake City, but went to BYU. And she ran track.
Oh, she ran track. That was it. I knew there was I was like Sporty Bella. It made zero sense.
I would pay good money to watch Bella jump hurdles. Can you imagine?
So it's kind of like the geography of like 50 Shades, but 50 Shades never did any editing or fixing it. Never mind.
Hold on there.
Yes.
No, see, I was determined to love Twilight as when it came out, because that was my first of all, it was my first fandom. It was the first time I was ever on a red carpet, even though I was on the other side with a bunch of Twilight moms screaming our heart out like I was 12. And we had a great time. And then we met Catherine Hardwicke the night before the movie came out. She came by the fan line and I flipped out. I was beside myself.
Impression.
I know. No, lie on the floor. Let's talk about it. No.
I
But
love
do not
Catherine.
knock her. She is the most profitable female director ever because of Twilight. And she got us through a lot of doors in the film industry because it is a huge man-made world. And it is a bitch for a woman to get anything. So the fact that she got Twilight, and then the fact that Twilight, thank God, had a huge fandom and like blew up box office records, that proved that a woman could do that. So no
Let's be
matter
honest.
what I think of parts of it,
Let's be honest. There is
That's shameful.
undeniable chemistry between Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart in these films, and she gave us that. And if the chemistry had not been believable, the films would have never worked. And
That's
she
true.
gave us that.
Mhm.
If but for that, we need to say thank you, Catherine Hardwick.
Thank you for the little blue film. It's great.
Hey, that was a choice. That was cinematography choice.
We got
I
that
guess.
baseball.
That Cullen Land was all in that light blue Lee 201.
Yeah.
I loved it.
No,
Okay,
I do.
Let's go on. I know Kara's only got like 15 more minutes with us. Let's jump to
Oh,
new.
okay.
And let's start with Savvy, because you said that was your favorite.
Yes.
So Savvy, what is one big difference between New Moon film and New Moon book?
The one that just crushed me at first when I first saw it, because Lord knows I saw it like 9 times in theaters, but the first time that I saw it, I really didn't like how they handled the conversation between Bella and Alice going to Italy. So in the book, it is in the plane, like Bella's like barely holding on, like mentally, and she's just like, talk to me about something. What's going on? You just need to distract me. And so you get all of that information from the and the background of the Volturi, which again I totally love. But then it becomes that kind of game that Bella is so good at, which is starting to talk about something and manipulating the conversation to get what she wants. So getting to the point of telling or getting Alice to basically be like, yeah, okay, you're going to become a vampire, obviously. Yeah, I'll change you. Don't worry about it. Like, she almost had like a signed contract for that. And I liked how that tension and that push and pull was going, and it just followed all the way through. And so then by the time that you get to the point where she's running to kind of save Edward, you really feel how dangerous this situation is that they're going into. And in the movie, it's just kind of like, okay, here's this awkward, bumpy ride in a Porsche, which would not happen. Porsches are very smooth driving cars, but it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going into this situation, and yeah, just don't get hurt, like don't fall, like let's be funny about it. And I was like, oh, well, I like that there was the you kept the Porsche in there, but like in the movie, it felt more like, okay, she's just this obsessed girl going to make sure that her boyfriend's okay, instead of like ish is gonna go down here.
Kara, how about you? Big difference between between New Moon.
New Moon and New Moon movie was Volterra did not work out the way I thought. Technically it all matches Edward going to step out into the sun and sparkling and the whole world falling down around him, but there was so much more tension in the book and I was so worried. And when we got to the movie, it was like, all right, 2:05, we got to cut this down. Let's go, go, go. And I just didn't feel, we didn't have that building tension to everyone getting to Italy and the fear that, everyone's going to die. It all kind of just came up short for me. It didn't have that whole huge crescendo of, 400 pages, which you can't do, but that's where it kind of came up a little short for me.
Yeah, one of the things in that moment that I love that is in there is the whole going into the castle when they're dropping Bella down the hole and all of that. It's like horror movie description, and I couldn't wait to see that on film. And again, it's one of those things that didn't make it in.
Yeah. How about you, Mel?
So I would have to agree with Savvy. Like the whole plane ride was that was so intense in the book, and then you just don't get that. But then you also don't get basically any of Alice her personality, anything like that in the film, where you actually get those little quips and moments in the book. And the other thing was, even though, yes, it was a more Jacob focused film, we didn't get to see that difference. And I know Amy and I discussed it heavily when we were doing our chats. We didn't get to see that transition of him just being this little boy and then going to this 6'7", 6'8" man. And you didn't get that difference. You didn't get that like, oh, like, Bella, I love you so much. You're my best friend. And then just like, there was that harshness about him right after that. And you're like, you don't get that in the film at all.
Callie, how about you?
I was going to say the same thing, Mel. The Jacob stuff, it kind of was sad. I married my best friend. So I'm not saying that it should have been that way in the books, but I wanted more of Jacob to be out there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but was New Moon also the wig issue? Like it was, no, it was Eclipse. Yeah.
Eclipse.
But it was, I felt like though, the whole Quileute tribe, like the whole like idea of what was happening with Jacob becoming a man and Bella's equal, and like it wasn't there. He was still that little kid, like you said. But yeah, and the end was rushed. I mean, you guys already said all of that, and that's exactly how I felt.
Amy?
Well, you both talked about the Jacob thing, so I'll pick something else, but that's definitely part of it. I'll go Carlisle here. So I love the fact that we got the sort of the Volturi flashback, the old period costumes. But I think one of the most important lines for Carlisle is the one about having to whenever I have to say it, it doesn't come out, with doing the best with what he's been given, or whatever that line. I totally had it earlier. Now it's gone from my vocabulary, but about making choices and doing, can anybody have the quote?
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. Doing the best with what I've been given, something along those lines. But anyway, it's not in there. Even in the extended edition version, it's not in there. And I know that was like an important line to Peter too, and I'm pretty sure that they filmed it, but it's not in either version. And it's such like an important line. And it's not even called out as one of the quotes for him in the official guide either. And it is just such a moment. Mel, do you have it?
I was looking.
You looked like you had it.
You're the Carlisle chick. We depend on you.
I know. I should have had it up.
Hold on. I don't know.
Yeah, like like everything in life, you have to, do the best with what you're given, or something like that. But anyway, so that not being there. And my other thing was, there's always a scene that, like, when you're reading the book, I can't wait to see this on screen. And it was when the family when Edward and Alice and Bella get back to the airport in Seattle, and the family's waiting there, and Esme and Carlisle are in the corner, and like Esme's like, don't ever do that to me again. That line I can remember. And Edward's like, sorry, Mom. Like, that was, again, the family dynamic things that like, I feel like, at times we lose and we miss in the movies. But
and sticking Bella in a car with Rosalie.
Yes, and sticking in the car with Rosalie, and we didn't get to see any of that. Like, everything in life, I had to do the best with what I was given. I think that's it. That's pretty close.
Well, I think the ending was really, really rushed. And I miss the fact that, like, the plane ride home, you guys were all talking about the plane ride there. The plane ride home, just everything about them coming back. And the airport scene. But like Bella, in the book, Bella thinks that as soon as they get home, she's going to lose Edward again. And that's not, like, he tells her that in Volterra, that he's going to stay with her as long as, and so that tension's gone. And I also don't like the phone call in the movie. It comes out that Jacob is very mean and vindictive about it because he knows it's Edward. And in the book, he thinks it's Carlisle, and he just, casually says, oh, he's at a funeral, and it ends up being a bad thing. But in the movie, it comes out that Jacob's very, like, vindictive. Just little choices.
The wording, though, in the book is very, like, specific. It says he says at the funeral, which we talked about a lot, because we were like, as opposed to just at a funeral. So why would he say the funeral? Which to me would have been it being the situation, the person on the other end of the phone would have been Bella, no matter what. So I find it interesting that Stephanie chose the funeral instead of a funeral.
Oh, and one other change that I thought was it was completely done for a cinematic reason, for a film reason, and that is ending the film with the "Marry Me." Because in the book they discuss it. In the film they discuss. I mean, in the book they discuss it, and they take the vote and they have all of that. Right. In the film, with him ending it with the "Marry Me," and it's like, what? Go to credits. As a film experience, it makes you, well, where's the next film? Yeah.
I will never forget. My mom turned to me and she's like, when does the next one come out?
6 months, don't worry.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to Eclipse, and we're gonna get in Kara's big difference in Eclipse before she has to hop off, because we've only got like 10 more minutes with her. So let's move on to Eclipse. Okay. Book versus film for Eclipse, and we'll start with Kara.
Okay, thing that I thought they did really right was Bella's graduation party that Alice, of course, designed and looked absolutely nothing like Bella. I thought that layout was beautiful. That looked exactly like a Alice production. That was what I wanted it to be. Disappointing for me was the tent scene. It was good, but I just don't think, God, I must have read that scene like a billion times. Remember Twilight Tees? They had a t-shirt that just said tent scene. There's just so much tension between Edward and Jacob. That's like one of the most pivotal scenes in the entire series for me. And to me, it just didn't come across on film. I don't know that it really could have, because I think part of the tension was reading it for the first time and the back and forth and the back and forth. And I just don't think it is like a 2-camera shot. They could have done it better. That's really all I'm saying. It just didn't create tension for me.
When I went to the Oprah show, we had a screening of Eclipse that it wasn't finished, because like a lot of the wolf stuff was still CGI'd in the version that I saw.
I see cow in his eye. Yes.
Things that they went and reshot were the original version, and the tent was the original version. And the tent scene was worse. It was so awkward. They were positioned. He did not have his arms around Bella. She was like kind of like laying on him. The positions were different. They just looked different. The angles were different. And it wasn't as long. So what we ended up with, because they reshot the tent scene, and what we ended up was better. But I agree with you. It's not as good as in book. Not as good as the book.
It's not as good as in the book. You don't have that.
How about you?
Okay, so and I hate to do this because, oh gosh, it was a casting issue. It wasn't, I personally don't think it was a script or a book issue. It was just Jacob was not Jacob from the book to the movie. So you couldn't have that tension to begin with. For me, that was, that's where the issue lied. And I love Taylor Lautner. Like, that's not a thing at all. I think that he played the character great for Twilight, but he didn't become the character that we read through the book series.
That's true. He didn't have the maturity. I think it just didn't, or it didn't come across as the maturity, because really in the book, it's like almost a meeting of equals. And which way is she going to choose? And it's not a kid versus the man. And that's really how it did come across in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, it's one of those where I'm trying to think, as far as loving the movie and the book, I love both, but it's one of those where I think that because of the casting, the decision was not hard for Bella for me in the movie. And that's where I think it fell flat a little bit from the movie. But again, it's one of those where I think some of those sub characters that we see in the high school, like some of that really came through and helped out. But again, for me, I think after like around middle of New Moon, it's kind of like, that's where I'm like, you know what, you kind of lost me. And I mean, I'm rooting for Bella and Edward, but where in the books, I kind of maybe rooted for Jacob a little bit. I wasn't rooting at all really for Jacob by the time we got to Eclipse.
But I think you nailed it, that was a problem with New Moon. that we lost some of those things that we talked about from New Moon in losing those Jacob moments, those little things that left it open in Eclipse that you were like, why does she want him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and the scenes like the tent scene, you like when it's not someone that you think, oh, she should be with him, 6 months ago, like there's no reason for her to be with him now. And I can see how it might have helped some people too moving forward, because then there was no tension between Bella and Jacob for there to be awkwardness in Breaking Dawn. But like it's still, I feel like that even that part of reading Breaking Dawn, which we'll get to later, you're kind of like, oh, it's not as awkward as it should be. It's not as weird. So.
Mel, how about you?
So Eclipse, despite it being my favorite book, was a very hard film for me to swallow. I was the spoiler-free girl for Eclipse going into watching the film. The upside of it for me was definitely that I feel like they nailed, aside from Jack Houston not having blonde hair, they nailed Rosalie's backstory. But there was just so many of those small details, like with the Quileutes backstory, that they missed out on, that I was just like, where was all of it? Like, where is all this stuff? It doesn't, for anybody that's simply a film fan, they're missing all of those little details and they're not really grasping the whole of what it is.
Yeah, we lose a lot of information that's important. Like nowhere in the movies do we learn that the wolves don't age as long as they're phasing. Nowhere we missed a whole lot of the history backstory. I mean, you got the story of the third wife, but you don't get a lot of the backstory. I mean, there's a lot of information we never get, and this is a Breaking Dawn thing. We never get the chromosome thing. Not that that's like vital to the books or anything, but there's just a lot that we don't get for the wolves. Yeah. Savvy.
I used to joke that like Eclipse was the film that just you could have just plucked it and just okay, you could have gone away with that and you could have been fine. But watching it, I do enjoy like I love the fight scenes that are in it, like the practice fighting that they do, and then the actual scenes. It's the first time that you get to actually kind of see them all kind of working together. And then also kind of on a massive scale about how dangerous this all is. I mean, because you've got the stuff with James beforehand, and then the wolves kind of taking out Laurent and everything, and the threat of the Volturi kind of fighting them in New Moon. But in Eclipse, it kind of comes to a head, and then not only does it happen, it's also like, it's kind of a lose-lose situation. Either these newborns come and we all die, or we kill these newborns and we know the Volturi is going to come here and we're going to be in trouble anyway. So I kind of liked seeing how that played differently in the films than in the book. I also love that in the films, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that you actually see some scenes with Victoria and the newborns, and you kind of get that background of what's going on kind of in the Seattle area and how angry and kind of desperate she is. And it kind of colored the story a lot more than in the book, where Bella's just like, oh God, I'm terrified of this person that's just kind of here. And in the books, I was never really afraid of Victoria. I was like, whatever, like Edward's gonna take care of that. That's not a problem. But in the movies, it's kind of like, yeah, she's kind of an issue. She's gonna be a problem.
Amy.
I mean, a little bit what I said before about, and a little bit what Savvy just said too, it's getting that other perspective that that's not Bella's view of things, but also the Jacob thing as well. Like, it's, as we've been, doing the reread, it's like Jacob is so like lovable at points and fun. There's after, like, in the book, he figures out how to get past Alice and like drives, like isn't just hanging out in the parking lot at the school, drives up to the schools like, Bella, jump on, so they can get away. And when they get to the push, like they're literally like kids jumping around, happy dancing, that like, yeah, we figured it out, or Jacob figured out how to get past it. I mean, you never see that joy in Jacob. And you never like, again, like he talks about being like 25, you're looking like he's 25, he's 6'7". Taylor, adorable, but he was never really, that rival or that like man, like what Jacob
Mhm.
becomes. Like, I have a younger brother who's 6'7". Like looking up at that is like, it's tall. Like as opposed to like
He
Taylor.
needed to be more of like what Chaskey Spencer looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
mature looking. So like
Mhm.
there was not said he's so, and there's so many moments too where it's like the angst of Jacob. It is like overacting by Taylor, and the kiss is just
oh,
awkward.
oh, that was the worst.
Yeah, painful.
I agree with everything that you guys
Mhm.
said, but I am going to harp on something just personally that actually, let's see, Tyler in the chat, and oh no, I'm going to say this name wrong. Monse, M-O-N-S-E. Is it Monse or Monse? In the chat, both said, I'm sorry, Eclipse has the worst hair of any
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, I remember that clearly from the
Oh
fandom.
God,
It's horrible.
It
Everybody
was.
was getting haircuts or wearing wigs for other movies, and
it was bad.
dye jobs were bad, bleaches were bad. Like it was just horrible, and it was something people talked about for like months. It was bad.
That was so crazy because that was also when they got big money too. I mean, that was after Summit was bought out, so there was no excuse. There was literally no excuse for what happened with those.
I remember
Like,
Ashley, after
go
all
ahead.
that, Ashley cut her hair. Like I remember
Yes.
it was one of those things where she was so dedicated to the fandom, she went and cut her hair.
Like
Like
get her hair short.
Well, I think like
Yeah,
it's
and what
so much
bugs-
more-
What I think bugs me the most about it is that we make such a big deal in the books that they can't change, and yet their hair changes.
Esme changes colors.
I mean, even Rosalie's blonde changes colors. Like the blonde in Eclipse was probably the best blonde as to what I imagined as far as color wise.
Right.
But yeah,
Esme's
all of those changes was just
in
like
the movie. Esme's got like kind of brownish toward the beginning, but by the time the fight scene at the end, her hair's like black.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I totally Rosalie's hair bothered me the most throughout all the movies because it got worse each time. Like, in Twilight, her hair was great, and I think she was actually dyeing her hair for Twilight.
yeah,
And
she
then
was dyeing her
probably,
hair and it was falling
Mhm.
out.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
falling
so,
out.
like,
It was
she's like, I
not a
can't
good
do
scene
this.
for her head, but
Yeah, but like each wig got worse. It was like bulkier and bulkier each time. I'm just like, what is going on? Like poor Rosalie. Like I love this character, and Nikki Reed is absolutely gorgeous, but I'm like, the wigs are just
she's
terrible.
drop dead gorgeous,
worst
and then
part.
she kept looking less and less Barbie with each wig adaptation. It was just getting, more and more.
yeah.
I remember when the first Eclipse poster came out of the three of them, and I saw like a small version of it, and I thought it was Jane in the middle because it looked like this hood around her face. I mean, I think why
Because it was that weird
really-
wind blown.
Yeah, I think Eclipse, like everybody really harps on because that's the only one where Bella's in particular is like she's wearing a wig and it's the worst of all of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. There was one other thing, total change of topic, that in talking about Rosalie's backstory, there's not a mention in the film about how much she wanted her friend Vera's life and how jealous she was of Vera. And I thought that's a really good setup for why Bella calls her in Breaking Dawn, and we lose that in Eclipse.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, it's a little bit in the extended edition. You do see her with the baby and talking with her friend. But yeah, it would have been really helpful to set up Rosalie to have that in there.
The one thing that really bothered me about Eclipse was how Edward came across whenever Bella wanted to go hang out with Jacob. In the books, when everybody was reading it, like you got all the haters that said, oh, this is like a codependent relationship and he's so controlling. In the books, I got the fact that he was afraid for her safety. Yeah, there was a little bit of the jealousy behind it, but it was mainly like, this dude's volatile. Like, you're going to get hurt. Look at Emily. Come on. But like in the books, it just comes up as straight up just like controlling and jealousy. And it's like petty. And I really didn't like how that played out in the film for it.
All right, since she's still here, I'm going to change the order just a little bit because we're going to go to Breaking Dawn 1. I'm going to let Kara get hers in again because I know that I usually would switch and let somebody else go first, but just so she can get hers in. So Kara, go ahead and give us your big difference in Breaking Dawn 1.
Gosh. My favorite moment from Breaking Dawn 1 absolutely is the wedding. And I think I'm going to just leave it at that because the wedding was beautiful. It was better than I had envisioned it in my head. I just thought, just her dress was beautiful. The setting was perfect. Doing a long shot and seeing Stephanie and Wick and everyone in the audience, that was like my takeaway moment of thinking this is the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm not going to do my big difference because it'll take too long, but I do have to leave you all. Thank you guys for having me. This has been awesome. Come to twilightmoms.net, come visit us. And please, before you leave, you all need to talk about Breaking Dawn Part 2 and all of us sitting at the premiere in the
I got that.
you know when. Yeah. The screams. I thought that place was going to fall down. That's what I thought. All right. Bye, ladies.
Bye,
Thanks,
Carla.
everyone.
Okay, so Amy, big difference for Breaking Dawn 1 book film.
So I mean, yes, the wedding was beautiful, and I loved like Stephanie. We were like, oh my god. But it was funny because I came across a piece of fan art in the last like week or so that I was like remembering like the scene, one of those things that I'd actually put in there. I was like, I can't wait to see this in the movie, and it wasn't there, which was Esme and Edward dancing at the wedding reception. Wasn't there. And also Carlisle like being his best man. Like those like two things for me like were things I was really excited to see. I always prefer Carlisle and Esme, but the characters that you stick to.
Well, in the books they didn't have all of the speeches that they had in the movie, and I think that's where they flip-flopped, like maybe not having that stuff and having the speeches. But I'm like you, I would rather had the moments than to have the speeches personally.
Yeah, the speeches were kind of, I know some people love them. I find them rather awkward. And like, I know they're supposed to be, but awkward at times cringy more than funny. So that's my opinion on that. But yeah, I would have rather seen like Carlisle give a speech than even Esme. So.
Callie, what's your big difference?
So I think for me, one of the big things that I don't know if it bothered me, I just wish there had been more of it, was the telepathic communication between the wolves. I think we got like a taste of it, but there was just so much happening and the wolves were a lot more present. And I just wanted that to be something that we could have witnessed somehow, some way, just because it, and I also would say we missed out on a little bit of the Alice and Jacob relationship and from the transition from the book to the movie that I loved so much. But again, I'm a big Alice fan, so I loved when in the books she and Jacob actually become friends. Like they kind of lean on each other a little bit.
Savvy?
I really like that in the movies. Maybe it's because again the casting choice for Jacob just that arc didn't happen so great, is that Jacob's perspective of what's going on in the movie doesn't like demonize and almost make it like wrong what Bella's doing. Like I do not like reading the first part of or that chunk of Breaking Dawn where you're in Jacob's perspective, because it's like it makes, just from his perspective, it makes me feel like, okay, she's doing this that's wrong. What she's doing is wrong. And I get that that's supposed to be his opinion of it, but I just don't like, it just feels, I don't like it. So I like the fact that it comes across more as worry and concern instead of like, look at how gross this relationship is and look at how he's like manipulated, like look what he's done to her, and now she's brainwashed and now she thinks she has to carry this child. And obviously later on you find out that that's really not the reason of it, but I like that it didn't color the film that way. And I also really like how Edward isn't just like this mopey, like, oh, kill me now for what I did to Bella in the movie. He's like, it's actually like the stages of grief. Like at first he's like really shocked and almost in denial of what's happening. And then he gets really, really angry for what's happening too. And then it's more of like, as they start to find out what's going on, like bargaining with her about like, hey, you know what, we can try something else. Like, please just survive this. And then, of course, the really kind of sweet scene that I really liked that they did well in the book and the movie, where he kind of accepts what's going on when he first hears Renesmee, or future Renesmee, the child at that point. And so that's kind of his acceptance point. And he's like, okay, so there is kind of value to this, or there is a worth for it. And he kind of gets on the same page as Bella, where Bella's always been. She's like, there's something to this, and there's a reason why this is happening. And it's good. It's not something, yeah, it's going to be hard, but it's not this big evil thing. So I like how it comes across in the movie a little bit more. But I see the reasoning behind why you have to be in Jacob's head and kind of see it from a different point of view of that. Otherwise, you're just like, yeah, if you're sitting there in Bella's consciousness and like, yeah, I'm convinced we're fine, it doesn't build that type of tension.
So, the scene where Edward hears the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So in Forever Dawn, I don't know how, let's just make sure everybody understands what Forever Dawn is. Stephanie wrote Twilight, then she wrote Forever Dawn. And Forever Dawn, Edward never leaves her. They just kind of are happy for about 100 pages and then get married, and it's not very good. But once they get married and she gets pregnant, then the rest from them getting married and getting pregnant and all of that is what we have in Breaking Dawn. It's the beginning of Forever Dawn that is different. And in Forever Dawn, she wrote it, Edward hearing the baby, it's from Bella's perspective. And it is so beautiful. And it was one of the biggest disappointments of switching perspectives, in my opinion, to Jacob's point of view, is that we get that very beautiful husband-wife family moment from an outsider hatred point of view.
Yeah.
And because he's,
I don't like, that's why I don't like that Jacob perspective in the book, because it's, yeah, it makes her seem mentally unstable.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just, yeah. So.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I was going to say, I agree with you about the Jacob POV, but I will say the one thing as an author that I can respect is that Stephanie had to change Jacob's his opinion. He had to change his mind, or she had to change his mind. And so I think that POV, like you said, it caused some drama, like it helped keep the story alive, but it also made it more dramatic when we see what happens in Breaking Dawn too. So it's kind of one of those as like a story arc. It's nice to see the character change so much just as a reader, but I'm with you as far as like when you want to see the wolves communicate or hear them talking, like the telepathically and stuff. I don't want to hear like, she's awful, she's horrible, like you were talking about. But it's one of those things where I feel like they're arch nemesis, like they're for centuries have been this group of people, not necessarily specifically the Cullens, but they don't know. He doesn't know. He's just a new wolf that's following the lead of these other wolves. So for me, I think that you're right. Like, I don't like the hate about it, but I also think that as a reader, that's what kept me reading, to see him change. So.
Who do I have last? Mel, I think you're next.
That's me. So I think one of the things that, everybody kind of touches on it. The wedding is absolutely beautiful. And I just remember sitting there in the theater, and it was at the premiere, and I was just sobbing that whole time. I'm like, this is just so beautifully done. And that moment when they get just that, it's just the two of them and there's nobody in the background. I'm like, I can get that, because Bella has finally found her spot. And I feel like maybe a little bit that was missed out in the book, where you get her point of view, but you don't get that visual in your head necessarily, where the film actually finally brought that to life, where you're just like, oh yes, now I understand it a little bit more. Two of the things that I kind of missed out on were the whole with Bella's before and after car. So that was a big one that I don't know why it always stuck out in my mind, when she was just it was basically like having a tank at the beginning of the book. And the other part that stuck out to me, and I was just kind of going back through it really quickly since Amy and I haven't gotten there yet with our reread, is the relationship that you get to see between Quill and Claire. And I think that was set up so well in the book that it gave you that idea that imprinting wasn't all that horrible. because Quill was just Claire's best friend. You got to see those little, like, he would do anything. He would, and it's not that, oh my gosh, I love her so much, like weird relationship that everybody sees immediately with the whole Renesmee and Jacob storyline. But it was just that she had a protector for life built in, and you got to see that in the book.
And what's even worse though is the very small snippet of it that you get in the film. What do they say? They're like, oh, well, you couldn't imprint on a kid. Ugh, ugh. Which makes it creepy when he imprints on Renesmee.
And it's creepy when he's like, can I call you dad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we also miss one of the things that I liked about Jacob's point of view in the book is him running out and like driving around trying to imprint on people. Yeah. And he's like, come on, if I could just imprint on someone, this wouldn't bother me so much. And they didn't do that in the movie. Yeah, it's a time thing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we discussed about the film. Is there anything else?
It's hard because I haven't read the book or listened to the audiobook since like the movie came out. So that's trying to remember this one. Like there's very specific things, but I'm sure like when Mel and I get to it, we'll be like, oh, that.
I feel like when Jacob imprints, he actually like goes and tells Sam, and they like make an agreement. And in the movie, they change it to up the stakes in having the pack come to kill Bella and the baby, and Jacob jumping down and like protecting the house, and Edward saying they can't kill the baby because Jacob imprinted on her. And it added to the tension of his imprinting. It added to the importance of his imprinting, other than just hearing about it and saying, oh yeah, I talked to them, I told them you can't kill her now because that would be like killing me. I thought that was a good choice, a good change to make it, to up the stakes for Jacob. All right, then we're gonna move on to Breaking Dawn 2, and Mel's gonna get to go first. Are you gonna say the battle? Is that
I am gonna say the battle. So it's a funny thing. I discussed it with my roommate yesterday when I had gotten home. I was like, the one big thing that I can just recall is when I read the books, it was all of this lead up. And then you get to that point and nothing happens. Nothing. It's just, oh, everything's hunky-dory. Like, move on. And then you get to the point in the film, and I think because all of us are not, I won't say everybody, but a lot of people were so disappointed that it wasn't written into the book. We then just didn't expect it to be in the film at all. We were just like, yeah, it's just going to go. We're going to see all these extra vampires. Things will go great. Nothing's going to happen. Then we get it in the film, and everybody just lost their minds.
So here's the thing though, in the trailer, there was always that image of like all of them like charging, and because like Bella and Edward were in the center and there were all the vampires behind them, because that was in the trailer. And I remember saying to Laura, where are they running? I don't know where they're running.
They actually had some of them, like the meeting in front. There were a couple of little flashes of them actually fighting, and that's what kept me interested. I was like, what is going on? Because like this doesn't happen in the book. What are they doing? Like I really wanted to know. And so, well, I don't want to take up on Melissa's time, but like that fed into that oh my god moment. Like when
but no, and I think that was part of it is too. Like we kind of saw that, but we all just forgot from reading the book when we were that disappointed in it not happening that we were like, oh, like they're just like cinematically trying to do something weird.
Well, see, that's why there's there's chess pieces, is that it's a gentleman's game. Chess is a gentleman's game. And there wasn't a battle because it ends up being like a gentleman's game. That there's, it's more strategy and planning and thought, and chess is a slow game. And that's how it all ended. I remember talking to Stephanie about the battle and going, well, that's kind of boring. And she's saying, well, but it's, it's strategy. It's all they know what would happen, and so their strategies didn't work, so they know to back down.
Yeah, see, when I first read the book, I actually liked it. There was so much tension and all of these little moves. And again, even in the book, you're saying, like, she's watching everything, like who's shifting, who's coming forward. Like, is this like somebody over here is looking like they're going to come forward and like stuff's going to start? Or like when she had to let Edward out of her shield so that then he could go up and talk to Arrow and everything. She's like, this is such a bad thing. Like, this could, like, really bad things could happen. I really liked that it was strategy like that, and that it turned out that Bella was this big badass piece that kind of negated everything that Arrow and everybody else had kind of planned. And they're like, okay, fine, we back. And we're like, we give. I liked that. It was like a game of chess when somebody just kind of knocks over their king and goes, all right, fine, I'm done. I liked that in the book, and I was wondering how they were going to do that in the movie, because I'm like, it's so mental. Like in the movie, you're just going to see people like intensely looking around at each other. They're like, oh, yeah, okay, we don't fight. I'm like, oh, they got to do something.
I will say too, when you were reading it, you really understood how old they were because of the strategy behind it. And I felt like that's the one thing that was the transition to the movie that I loved, seeing every single person and them not being too far off the mark at that point from what you read to what they were visually on the screen. And to me, like, obviously the fight scene, like the battle scene, was epic, especially if you were in that room. I'm sure that theaters across the country felt that, but it was one of those things though, that from the book, I appreciated it. Like you, it was just savvy. It was one of those where I was like, they're old. Like, they've lived so long. They know what fight to pick, which one to let go. And so I kind of like that too in the book. But I mean, I'm not even going to joke. Like, Breaking Dawn 2 blew that out of the water. Like, when they threw that scene in there, I was like, what? Like, this is amazing. And I think that the cast and the crew and like, they were all so pleased with how surprised everyone was. Everyone I talked to afterwards that I knew was just like, we couldn't say anything. And it's just like this cool thing that we got to be a part of. I wish more writers would do that have their stuff made into movies or television, like where they do kind of leave some of that stuff out for really big fans to get an extra juicy bite, like when they're in the theater or watching on TV.
I know you were jumping off of what Savvy said. Did you have another big change that you wanted to talk about, Callie?
I'm trying to think. There were like little things timing wise. I think the story and the way the battle culminated, like I felt like we missed some of the holidays and some of the things that were talked about in the book, but it was just like little stuff, little nuancy type family stuff, kind of like, Amy, what you've talked about, that Cullen family. And I felt like in the book, we saw them becoming a family, even with Jacob, like it was awkward, but it was happening. And so some of that stuff I felt like was pushed back so that the battle and so that all these new vampires could be seen. And I was kind of okay with that.
So Amy, do you have anything else other than the battle?
Yeah, I was like I have thoughts on that, but I would say the all the stuff with Jay Jenks and it gets very tight in the film. But the whole like Bella goes to Seattle and talk to the guy on the porch and all of that was like really interesting, because it was just like
creepy homeless guy.
It was putting Bella in like a different world, like seeing her in a city, like having a different experience, her being on her own in her own skin as a vampire for the first time. One of my like favorite little moments in like all the franchise is when she's driving back in the car after the meeting and the music is playing and the look on her face is like the monologues going of like, her realizing that, Edward and her were not going to make it. Like that whole moment, I just love it. And she walks into the living room and like, when Esme runs over to Edward and just she's looking, those are like my favorite Kristen like acting moments in the whole saga. While I wish there was more of like kind of all that other stuff, like that moment in and of itself was so great.
Yeah, I also miss some of the training. I mean, she seems to figure out how to be a shield pretty quick in the film. But I mean, you've got a gigantic book versus a small film. And so there was some training, and I do feel like there were more opportunities to get to know all the rest of the vampires. Again, he added so many characters, and kudos to Bill Condon that he kept them all. He didn't cut them. And so trying to give all of the new characters their due, in the book you just get to know them a little bit better. And yeah, I just like the introduction of the new characters better. Plus, he mentioned Jasper mentions Peter and Charlotte in Eclipse, and we don't get that in Eclipse. And so Peter and Charlotte coming in, you also have to catch them up when, oh yeah, that's Peter and Charlotte. I forgot to mention them in Eclipse.
Well, they're also in Midnight Sun.
Well, yeah, they will be. They'll actually be in Midnight Sun.
Yeah.
Like, because they're there. They're hunting.
Yeah, I mean, they're mentioned in the version that was out there.
Because they're there, they're hunting.
Now, something else.
Other things.
Renesmee getting so old.
Yeah. She's 10 years old in the movie, whereas like she's supposed to be like what, 5 or 6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, you have to, from a casting perspective, it's the same thing. Have you guys ever seen Interview with a Vampire?
Yeah.
So the Kirsten Dunst in that is way too old to be playing that part. But again, you can't get the maturity that you need out of a 5-year-old actress. So they have to cast it a little bit older. And Mackenzie Foy is just adorable. Have you guys seen the picture of Mackenzie Foy and Kristen, like from 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Two of them together. Yeah. Any other details between Breaking Dawn Part 2, book to film? We're all just so hung up on the battle.
No, I mean, for me personally, I'm gonna always go back to my characters, but like the fact that Bill Condon made or whoever was scripting the choices to actually see more of Esme and like see her like stepping up in both Part 1 and Part 2, where you actually like see her like standing up for the family, standing up for Bella, like inserting herself, being assertive. And so when it comes to the battle, like Carlisle, she watches Carlisle die, but yet she is still fighting. She is not giving up, where I think like Bella would have like been like, okay, I'm done. Or Edward would have been like, I'm done if one of them died. And she was like, no, I'm still in this fight. And yes, I'm like, go Esme. And then we watch like Leah, the sacrifice. Oh.
Okay, let's see in the chat. Monse, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Monse. Monse. Chuck Esme.
We never saw Chuck Esme, the actual Chuck Esme, but
Oh,
oh my God, that just
Creepy.
sounds terrifying. And like, how can anybody keep a straight face with something like that looking at you? Like, oh my God.
She's terrifying. Well, they have her in Forks, and they also
yeah, they do.
They were also able to get the video footage from, I don't know if it was directly from Lionsgate or what it is, but they do have like one of the little clips of when Nikki has to be holding her, and it's so awkward. Like you can find it on YouTube as well, but
not like a double chin, and she's like ugliest baby.
Yeah, like
I'm pretty sure she's haunted.
Well, I think they say that she's haunted in Forks, like that they come in and she's moved in the collection. There was a whole article about that.
Annabelle, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
I also want to just give a shout out, should he ever see this, to the ending of the whole film. And I think it speaks highly of Bill Condon's recognition of that this is a fandom, that the fandom made these films what they were, and that the fandom needed to be honored. And so, like with all the turning pages and like giving each character a bow, and the music playing, and the forever, and I was bawling at the end of it because I was like, oh, this is such a beautiful fan tribute. it was just a beautiful ending. Somebody in the chat even mentioned that Victoria mentioned the ending.
I feel like
Well,
the
and then they did the same thing for Endgame with the Marvel movies.
I feel like for Bill Condon, like from the beginning of him being on the project, he probably beforehand, he was in tune with what was happening online. Like he knew, not necessarily like, I know so and so, but more like he knew what y'all were talking about or what I was talking about on a podcast. Not necessarily who I was, but he knew what the fans wanted. And I think that was huge when it came to the ending of the saga, because he knew that a lot of what came from that indie film happened because of the fandom, not Hollywood. And I think that he just was really in tune from the very, very beginning.
There were things that were like, I know personally were changed for part 2 because of feedback from fans from part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
A certain character's hair had a lot of digital enhancement.
Carlisle?
Mhm.
There was a group of at one point in an editing bay, there were a group of fans that watched a few minutes to just give comments. Like he wanted comments from fans, and that was something that was
Were
huge.
you at that?
Yeah, it was one of those where he wanted to know, is this too slow? Is this too red? Is this too graphic? Like, is this too? And
Because you guys saw like her first moments as a vampire, didn't you?
Yeah.
Is that what you
Yeah.
saw? Mm-hmm.
And it really was like, how did you see her waking up? And it was, I mean, we sat there for like an hour and talked about what we read and what we thought, and then we watched it and then we talked again. Like, you know, you want to be like, oh, this is great, you know, but I mean, we were honest. It was one of those where we said it's kind of slow there, and you know, that kind of thing.
Well, I had a conversation with Bill at one point. It was about there's a line in part one, Jasper, when it's like Alice and Rosalie are fighting about, you know, baby versus fetus, and Jasper says one word. What is it? Like there's whatever it is, and it like actually, because it's so like awkward, the audience laughed, and like Bill and I were like ended up talking at one point like about that word, and he's like, why are people reacting that way? I'm like trying to explain to him like the fandom and the thoughts on why this is an awkward moment. And it's not in the extended edition. That line, that one word, whatever that is that he says, is not in the extended edition. They took it out.
I don't know what you're now I have to go back and watch that part in Breaking Dawn, I guess.
Well, I mean, from the beginning, like all of you said, Bill Condon took it really seriously with these films, and it shows in the films, because one of my little pet peeves for Eclipse is that there's so much fan service in it, but it's really obvious. Like Edward saying to Jacob, oh, doesn't he own a shirt? That type of stuff. Like, you know, that
I am hotter than you.
Yeah, like that's placating to us. Like, oh, funny, going for the cheap laugh, or oh my God, I know what you're talking about. Like there's all those little things in Eclipse, and it's just kind of hokey to me. But like in both part 1 and part 2, all of the stuff that is for the fans is just put in there. And even if you aren't a hardcore fan, it brings like to the background of the movie. But like us as fans are like, oh my God, yeah, that's it. And oh yeah, that was so perfect. I love that it was brought in and made more organic into the films, instead of just like, here's a little line for the fans, oh here's this for the fans too. It shows not only again that he was taking it seriously, but the level of talent and creativity he has behind that, and the team that he was working with too.
It was elevated. That's the one thing I noticed between the movies previously to Breaking Dawn's 1 and 2. It was elevated, and
Yeah.
it was more mature.
And I think not only was he able to play into what fans wanted, but not in that hokey way, but also kind of playing into Kristen herself was a fan, and she had ideas, and he played into those more than any other director had, where she was able to bring more of those Bella-isms back to life.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the things I loved really seeing.
I want to come back to that point in just a minute, but Tyler Hudson in the chat says that he says possibly.
I just could say, yes, it's possibly. So they're going back and forth whether it's a fetus versus a baby. And he just says possibly. And yeah, the audience laughed because it was just awkward.
I wanna talk about Kristen Stewart for a minute. And if I don't know if we'll ever get around to talking about casting decisions or actors or whatever like that, but Kristen was probably one of the biggest fans and the biggest champion for the fandom. And I don't think she got enough credit for that. I know personally, so they did not originally have the lion fell in love with the lamb. What a stupid lamb, what a sick masochistic lion. They did not have that in the original Twilight script. And Kristen said, you know, people have this like tattooed on their body. It's cheesy, but we have to say it. Because the fans, if we don't say it, the fans will like murder us in our sleeps. We have to say it. I remember on the, I think it was the Eclipse press junket, we got a phone call at the fan sites, got a phone call with Kristen, and she was running late on her junket. And they said to her, we're going to cut your fan site phone call. And she said, were you on that phone call, Callie? And she said, do not cut the fan sites. Of all of the phone calls that I need to, of all the interviews I need to do today, the fan site is the number one. And she told us that at the beginning of our conversation with her. She said, you know, they were going to cut my call with you guys. And I said, don't you dare. That's the bread and butter right there. Don't you dare. And so I don't think Kristen got as the recognition that she deserves for making sure that the fandom got what we got, that it was done well enough. And so I hate it when people say, oh, she's not even acting, she's not even trying. Yes, she was.
Well,
Yes,
the character resonated with her. I think that's, you wouldn't have expected Bella to be on a press junket wearing a, you know, couture gown and words fluently coming out of her mouth about her acting. Like, no, like, and I think that she did it so well because that character resonated with her. And I think that is one of those things that you're right. Like the fandom didn't get it because they expected her to be what Hollywood was portraying the actress to be. And she was a teenager, like at the time, y'all, when this started. I mean, she was a 20-something with it when it ended, that's for sure. But I remember being on set for Twilight, and
She had to go study.
She was not there the whole time, and I was like, where did she go? And they were like, well, she's got school at the same time. And we were just we were floored. It was one of those, we were kind of like, oh, we didn't expect her to be that young, but she was. And it's kind of funny how much I think, again, it's one of those, some might argue typecasting, but she in a public place she acts the same way Bella would. You know, she doesn't want to be there. Like she'd rather be like at home, you know, not in front of a million people. And I think a lot of us would probably say the same thing. So I can't blame her.
All right, so this is getting a little bit long. How about are books better or are films better? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? Savvy, we'll start with you. Books or films?
Is this even a question? I mean, come on. But I always hands down will go to books. Books are always going to be my favorite because it's the world and the characters that you fall in love with. It's the ones that you see in your head. They have the exact voice that you think that they have, and it's just something that you can always kind of go back and visit. It's a lot more immersive. You get all the details. Good writers will be able to show you where they were going, or be able to show you what they wanted from the story. But films are really great because I love it because it's somebody else's take on it. So it's fun when some things match up, and yeah, we can sit here and be all mad about like, oh, this wasn't right or I missed this. But what I take away from films is that that's somebody else's interpretation of this story. So this story will always be something that's not that I love and that I can go back to. But the films are a really great way to visually see a different interpretation.
Mel?
Definitely books over films for me. And I think it just comes to, we get all of those little details. And then when we get those people that have only seen the films and they're like, but why this? And you're like, go read the book. It explains it all. It has all of that you're missing. So, but I do, again, like Savvy, I like that perspective that you get when you get to the films. It's somebody else's take on it.
Amy?
I feel like I was so negative tonight. Guys, I really do love the movies and the books, but no matter what, even the things I don't like, I still love every single one of them. But the books, there's rarely a movie that if I've read the book beforehand that I like better than the book. I can think of one, but yeah, the books and just all the details, and even the things that we learned coming out of the book world, not the movie world, those additional things, all that stuff I went and found, those deleted chapters, the Twilight lexicon, and all those correspondence with Stephanie Myers, and going into all that, doing all of that was based on the books. It wasn't because of the films. I wanted more after reading them.
Callie, I have a feeling you're going to say the same thing that everybody said.
I am. I don't think I can add any more. They said it perfectly. It is a world in your own mind that no one else can taint or tarnish or take away from you. And I love that. I'm an avid reader. It's just something I do. And I teach high school, and I very rarely meet a high school kid that loves to read. So it's one of those funny things that I think we all find that book, we find that story that we connect with, and that it makes reading come alive for us. And I think we're lucky that Twilight is one of those books for us. And I feel like that it's one of those things that a movie can be someone's take on it, but no one can take away what I read in the story that I was told and imagined when I was reading those books. So definitely the books.
I agree 100%. Books. Go for books. Let me check the chat one more time, and let's see if there's any questions that we missed.
I tell people this when it comes to books or movies. I love Twilight, and I have two official Twilight tattoos. One that's kind of tie-in a little bit, and the two that I have are from the books. They're book tattoos. They're not from the films. And even the third one isn't really the film, it's the actor from the film. So
well, that's our chat for tonight. Thank you all for coming. We went a little bit long, but I expected it to be. I mean, unless we had divided it up between, okay, we're only going to do these 2 books and then these 2 books, but we'll get it all done in one fell swoop here. And I don't know if I think we'll be on next week. The week after that, that's my son's graduation. Fingers crossed. I don't know if they'll let him, if we're doing it. I don't know. We'll see how graduation goes, but the summer is dying down. I do want to mention that we will be having, so Ficklefish Films and the novel, Amy, how do you pronounce that? N-O-V-L, novel?
Yes, it's pronounced the novel, but it's N-O-V-L, right?
N-O-V-L, the N-O-V-L is their handle is at the N-O-V-L. On July 24th, put this in your calendars, on July 24th, in celebration to a lead up to the release of Midnight Sun as a book, we are going to have a live tweeting session. We're gonna watch Twilight and live tweet along using the Ficklefish Films and the novel, like we're adding or the hashtag. Anyway, there's hashtags and apps that we have to use, but it's I'm on the list, and Amanda Bell and Amy's on the list, and Hypeable and the Cool Table and Fangirlish, and I'm sure we're gonna add, because when Kara saw it, she was like, why is Twilight Moms not on there? Bet you Twilight Moms will get on there. But we're gonna do a live tweeting as we watch Twilight, the film, and probably some of the things that we discussed here are gonna come out on Twitter. We're gonna be like, oh, there's Wind Chime Edward again.
Yay, the little blue film.
Oh, look, it's blue again. More blue.
Lori, it's 7 p.m. Eastern, right?
It is 6 to 8 Eastern. The film will run 6 to 8 Eastern. Do we know what channel is it on?
I think we're watching it. like on. We have to turn it on.
Oh, it's not on TV. You just
I don't
turn it
think
on
so.
your house, and it'd be better if it was on TV.
Yeah, there was an Eclipse watch along on Twitter that our friend Heather represented, and we all just kind of had to hit play at the same time. So
I wonder if they'd let us Zoom it. Probably not. Ooh, now I have an idea. Now that I know it's not on TV, now I have an idea. I wonder if they'd let us get in a chat like this and Zoom it.
That would be fun.
All right, now I've got ideas rolling around in my head. But that is July 24th from 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. That's pretty early for, how early is that for you, Amy?
That's gonna be 3 p.m. So
wow.
It's gonna be early for us West Coasters.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more on that later as we get any more details. But thank you all for joining us tonight.
And Mel on Tuesdays.
Yes, Tuesday. And where are you up to in Eclipse?
We are on chapters 15
through 18.
18 this week, so it's 7 p.m. Pacific time.
What
Oh my
chapter is
God, on
that?
Instagram live, and you can watch old ones on Instagram TV or IGTV.
Laser, Epoch, and Alliance, and Instruction.
Yes, so I figure that's finally fight training.
You gotta make sure I'm around when you guys get to Fire and Ice, so I can join in and make sure that I'm like following along with you guys.
You are all always welcome to come in and to see what we're chatting about and join in.
I was at my school's graduation this week. No,
we went last night. We were all off.
Oh, you did it last night.
Yes, we did Twilight Tuesday on Wednesday and Midnight on Monday on Thursday.
And we've it's all messed up. It's
been a week. That's why I couldn't think of Carlisle quotes. It's been a week.
Well, we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
4th. Love you
America.
all. Bye. Bye.